The coordinated suicide attacks of September 11, 2001, were the first major foreign assaults on American soil since 1814, when the British Army and Royal Navy bombarded the city of Baltimore. The attacks of 9/11, as all have come to know those events, also marked the second most violent day in U.S. history, with 2,793 deaths. Only the Battle of Antietam on September 17, 1862, surpassed this figure. Even the casualties on D-Day and at Pearl Harbor were lower. September 11th was a costly day, not just in the lives lost or families broken apart. The property damage and lost productivity alone probably exceeded $100 billion. The economic implications of the attack on Wall Street in terms of lower profits and economic volatility pushed the price tag up even further, as high as $2 trillion, according to some estimates. Americans should now know a great deal more about the origins of and planning for what Al-Qaeda calls the Manhattan Raid. They know when the plot was hatched, when key members of the conspiracy were informed of it, what its role model was, an earlier hijacking in Algiers, what arguments arose over the timing of the attack, who trained the plotters and where, and most important, what their objective was. And yet, many in America fail to comprehend the realities surrounding the assault. That ignorance leaves the United States vulnerable to committing the same policy errors that helped lead to 9/11 and to the quagmires in Iraq and Afghanistan that flowed from it. In large part, the public's ignorance and vulnerability are a result of a decision by the George W. Bush administration not to clearly explain to the American people the nature of the enemy, namely Al-Qaeda. The president chose to declare war not on Al-Qaeda, but on terrorism, a concept that he and Vice President Dick Cheney arrived at by confusing 9/11 with Saddam Hussein's Iraq. They have also argued that the attacks were motivated by a hate for America's freedom. As former governor of Arkansas Michael Huckabee has written, the Bush administration has never adequately explained the theology and ideology behind Islamic terrorism or convinced us of its ruthless fanaticism. The first rule of war is know your enemy, and most Americans do not know theirs. One has only to look at the opinion polls on Saddam Hussein's role in the 9/11 attacks. Even 2 years after the attacks, 7 out of 10 Americans, a clear majority, believed that Saddam was personally involved. Yet by that time, experts who had studied the evidence agreed almost unanimously that there was no link between Iraq and the 9/11 atrocities. The Bush-Cheney administration did nothing to disabuse Americans of these erroneous impressions. What is more remarkable is that this misperception lingered several more years. A Zogby poll in September 2006 found 46% of Americans still believed Saddam was connected to the attacks, and among Republican voters, the figure jumped to 65%. By that time, the only significant evidence even remotely connecting Iraq to the attacks, an alleged meeting in Prague in mid-2001 between one of the hijackers, Mohammed Atta, and an Iraqi intelligence officer, had not only been generally discounted, but also formally recalled by the Czech intelligence service, which had originally produced the report and subsequently admitted to a case of mistaken identity. Indeed, even as the events were unfolding, intelligence experts, like myself, had no doubt that the responsibility lay with Osama bin Laden and his Al-Qaeda organization. The attacks had all the hallmarks of Al-Qaeda and were preceded by months of warning that an assault on America was coming. Gary Schroen, one of my colleagues who led the first CIA team into Afghanistan after 9/11 to hunt for bin Laden, remembers the day at CIA headquarters in Langley this way. As soon as the second aircraft smashed into the second tower, everyone said, "Bin Laden. It was bin Laden. This isn't an accident. This isn't some tragedy that's some tragic accident. This is the attack that bin Laden's been promising." I came to exactly the same conclusion at the White House at the same time and told National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice.